The day the delegation from the High Concord refused Earth's welcome was the day the galaxy shifted. They didn't send a message. They didn't offer an apology. No warning, no pretext. Their fleet simply stopped at the edge of Sol's system, hovering in silence like gods too afraid to touch the dirt of men. On Earth, confusion turned quickly to paranoia. The news was controlled at first, scrubbed and softened for the public. Routine detour, they said. Standard navigational safety. But when the same High Concord ships, those of the oldest known species, the Eliari, refused to speak with even Earth's diplomats, people began to feel the chill that silence brings. Commander Trent Howler, head of the Earth Colonial Defense Bureau, watched the hovering specters from the orbital base Argo Spine, his jaw clenched and knuckles white. His past made him a cynic, but this silence? It felt like dread wearing a polite face. "These are Eliari vessels, sir," said his assistant, Cormac, nervously. "They've been in contact with every Tier 1 world. Even the Drath let them walk on their soil." Howler didn't respond immediately. He stared at the screen, eyes narrowed. Cormac shifted. "Should we initiate an inquiry? Or try to hail—" "They're not ignoring us by accident," Howler muttered. "This is deliberate." There was something about the ship's position that unnerved him. They weren't in orbit, nor deep space. They lingered at the exact threshold of Earth's solar system, almost as if some invisible line had been drawn. And not even the galaxy's oldest, most revered species dared to cross it. On Earth, riots began in New Delhi and São Paulo after leaked footage from the lunar relay revealed the Eliari's exact location and silence. Conspiracy forums exploded, claims of secret weapons, ancient curses, alien retaliation. Some said the government had tampered with the DNA of prisoners. Others whispered about ancient relics buried beneath Antarctica, things mankind was never meant to find. But in the United North Coalition war room, Howler stood surrounded by the highest brass Earth had left: diplomats, strategists, liars in pressed suits. They all looked pale now. "Say it out loud," Howler said, eyes locked on the old UNSEC admiral pacing near the viewport. "What none of you wants to say." The admiral turned slowly, sighing through his teeth. "They're afraid." "Of what?" Howler pressed. The room fell quiet. No one had an answer, but the absence of one was starting to speak louder than words ever could. Meanwhile, in the dusted archive zones of Mars, a linguist named Donovan Slate stumbled across something that hadn't seen light in centuries: a cracked Eliari data scroll, pre-interstellar Concord. The Eliari had once called it Feron Thiel, their Book of Beginnings. Untranslated, decayed, mostly dismissed by historians, until Donovan fed it through his old AI interpreter and saw a phrase repeat over and over, inscribed in reverence and fear: "Earth, the sealed cradle, the place that broke the first." His fingers trembled. The translator wasn't perfect, but the structure was unmistakable. Every few lines, a warning. Not about mankind, not about technology, but about the place itself, the land, the ground, the history that came before the history. Back on Argo Spine, Howler got the report. He read it twice, leaned back, and laughed. But it wasn't the kind that meant humor. It was hollow, broken. "The galaxy thinks we're dangerous," he whispered. "Not because of what we can do, but because of what we are." Then his eyes went cold. "Bring the Eliari to the table. I don't care what it takes. I want to know what the hell they're not telling us." Cormac hesitated. "And if they refuse again?" "Then we make them talk." And far beyond Earth's reach, aboard the lead Eliari ship, a council of ancient beings sat cloaked in mourning silence. One of them finally spoke, his voice like rusted wind over forgotten ruins. "The seal was never supposed to last this long." Another replied, eyes closed, "It's stirring." They didn't say the word human. They said something far older, and it was waking up. Cormac had never seen Commander Howler this quiet. For a man known to shout over nuclear launch protocols and bark orders to interstellar diplomats without blinking, the silence was unnatural. The report from Mars lay on the table between them, its screen blinking softly with the translated text of the Eliari scroll. Earth, the sealed cradle, the place that broke the first. Cormac cleared his throat. "Commander, if this is accurate—" "It is," Howler cut in, voice low. "The Eliari don't exaggerate. Not about this. They're not like us. They don't believe in superstition unless it's earned." "Earned?" Howler looked up at him, eyes dark. "Something happened on this planet a long time before we even learned to walk upright. Something they buried. Something even they couldn't kill." Cormac looked away. "I thought Earth was irrelevant until we launched into space. Just another backwater world." "That's what we were told," Howler said. "But now we know different. The oldest race in the galaxy won't come within 1 billion kilometers of us. What does that tell you?" "That we're not the backwater," Cormac murmured. "We're the bomb." Donovan Slate hadn't left the Martian archive vault in over 30 hours. He looked like hell, his stubble now a rough beard, eyes bloodshot, fingernails grimy from prying apart ancient data cores and manually inputting corrupted syntax. He hadn't eaten. He barely remembered to breathe. But the data was coming together. The scroll was just the first clue. The real key was in the substrata of Eliari linguistic code, a dead dialect called Koth Nirel, spoken only during mourning rituals for species extinction. Why would they use that language in reference to Earth? Because they believed Earth had killed something once thought immortal. Donovan blinked at the translated line glowing on the cracked tablet. Here the first fell. Here the silence began. Earth, the wound that bleeds without end. He shivered. He was alone in that quiet vault, but he didn't feel alone. Not anymore. Something in those words, the silence began, felt alive, like it had never really ended. Maybe the galaxy had just stopped listening. His AI chirped. "Incoming secure request from United North Coalition. Voice authentication. Commander Trent Howler." Donovan almost didn't answer. But then he remembered. He was the one who woke the words. The Eliari finally responded. Not to Earth's governments, not to diplomacy, not to bribes, threats, or pressure. They responded directly to Commander Howler's message, sent in a private code only known to those few who had ever served in off-grid interstellar peace fronts, a dirty secret in Earth's early contact era. Howler had commanded unsanctioned recon ships in Eliari space once, during the quiet years. He wasn't proud of it, but it gave him leverage. Their response was a single sentence, transmitted through a decaying frequency. "You were not meant to wake it." Howler stared at the transmission. He didn't respond. He forwarded it straight to the classified conference chamber, where Earth's most powerful officials now paced like cornered dogs. "The Eliari believe Earth houses something," the defense minister said, rubbing his forehead like the headache had migrated into his skull and built a home there. "Something so old, so dangerous they placed a planetary quarantine without telling us?" "They didn't quarantine us," Howler said flatly. "They quarantined the galaxy from us. There's a difference." Silence, until a voice, calm, feminine, emotionless, broke through. "Commander, I believe I can assist." All heads turned. The room had an unexpected visitor, a woman dressed in stark white, older than most present. Her eyes were sharp, but her skin pale like she hadn't seen the sun in years. No one had noticed her enter. "How the hell did you get in here?" the minister barked. She held up a diplomatic seal, one that bore the sigil of a project so black its name wasn't written in any government ledger anymore. Project Rootwake. Howler's jaw clenched. "You're from the vault." She nodded. "And we've known this day would come." Project Rootwake had been buried beneath the Greenland ice shelf for over 80 years. Its creation had been justified during the early interstellar years when humans feared alien tech infiltration. But the truth behind its existence was far older. Rootwake's sole purpose was containment. The woman, her name was Dr. Helva Grant, revealed that Earth's core held anomalies no natural geology could explain. Gravity wells that bent local space-time. Magnetic pulses that followed no predictable pattern. Signals beneath the crust that mimicked neural frequencies. "We assumed it was alien technology buried in Earth's past," she said, "but the Eliari scrolls suggest otherwise." "Then what the hell is it?" Howler asked. She didn't blink. "A mind." Cormac scoffed, but no one laughed. "You're saying the planet is alive?" "No," she replied. "I'm saying something is sleeping inside it. Something the Eliari and perhaps other precursor races tried to bury, seal, forget. But Earth, being the unpredictable thing it is, adapted. It evolved around it. And now it's waking up." She nodded. "You've seen the planetary anomalies? Volcanic activity in regions with no tectonic justification. Ocean temperatures rising in symmetrical spiral patterns. Radio frequencies that don't bounce. They echo." Howler whispered, "The silence is breaking." Dr. Grant looked at him. "Exactly." The Eliari broke their silence again. A physical emissary did not arrive. Instead, Earth received a transmission of the most ancient rite, the Oath of Unbinding. It was a warning, a galactic signal of emergency used only once before, during the collapse of the Thrask Unity, when an artificial intelligence had consumed 13 star systems. The message was clear. If Earth crosses the line, the Concord will burn it. Cormac read the translation twice. "They're threatening us?" "No," Howler said. "They're begging us not to make them do it." Donovan Slate was escorted by black-suited guards onto the orbital elevator to Argo Spine. He hadn't wanted to come. He was a linguist, not a soldier. But the Eliari dialects were becoming unstable. The transmissions were morphing in structure, breaking syntactical rules. It was as if the language itself was infected. "Language doesn't evolve like this," he told Howler in the commander's private quarters. "Even AI interference can't generate the kind of recursive symbolism we're seeing. These messages, they're alive. They're responding to us, to our speech patterns, to our fear." Howler stared at him. "Are you saying Earth is speaking back?" Donovan didn't laugh. "I think whatever the Eliari buried is speaking, and it's learning fast." "And what the hell is it saying?" Donovan turned pale. He looked down at his tablet and read a line the AI couldn't translate properly. It had symbols instead of letters, glyphs that vibrated like a hum in your skull if you stared too long. But one line had translated, a single phrase that repeated in over 19 languages simultaneously. "I remember my name. Weeks passed. The Eliari fleet remained motionless at the edge of the solar system. Other species began withdrawing as well. Trade routes were severed. Earth's orbital stations reported ghost signals and unauthorized wake signatures in deep orbit. The galactic community was holding its breath. And beneath the Pacific Ocean, seismographs began picking up something new. A pulse. Once every 13 hours. Rhythmic. Intentional. It wasn't tectonic. It wasn't natural. It was heartbeat-shaped. Howler stood at the viewing deck of Argo Spine, staring at the stars. He felt it now, something in the air, in the low hum of the station. like Earth was vibrating on a frequency he couldn't quite hear, but his bones knew it. He lit a cigarette, despite regulations. Cormac stood beside him, pale and tired. "You think it's a god?" he asked quietly. Howler blew smoke towards the void. "Number gods don't sleep this long. This is older. This is worse." "What do we do?" Howler didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I think we're going to find out why we were left alone." "And?" He looked at Earth, the blue planet spinning slowly beneath them. "We were never alone." The hum had become impossible to ignore. It began quietly, more like a static buzz only a few noticed. Scientists in deep-sea listening stations, drone operators in silent orbital arrays, and a few unlucky engineers whose teeth wouldn't stop chattering. They all described it the same way. Not loud, not sharp, but felt, like a breath against the soul, or a whisper you almost heard but couldn't understand. On Earth, the public was still in the dark. Power grids faltered in brief, precise bursts. Magnetic north began drifting faster than at any point in recorded history. Satellites fell silent, not destroyed, not jammed, just quiet, like something had plucked the signal out of the sky and cradled it, muting it gently. On Argo Spine, Commander Howler watched the world unravel one small truth at a time. The Eliari had refused all further transmissions. No warning, no threat, no answer. They had simply turned away. "They're gone," Cormac said quietly, reading from the latest scan logs. "Their whole fleet, just gone." Howler nodded, saying nothing. He didn't have to. He knew what it meant. The oldest species in the galaxy had looked into the darkness and decided to run. The chamber deep beneath Greenland was colder than most parts of the solar system. The power grid keeping Project Rootwake stable ran independently of Earth's main infrastructure, drawing directly from an archaic geothermal core station no one had visited in 3 decades. Dr. Helva Grant had returned there for the first time in 21 years. Accompanied by 4 heavily armed UNCB guards and a backup generator team, she entered the vault like someone returning to the grave of something that refused to stay buried. They reached the terminal chamber. Thick walls of obsidian-infused concrete wrapped in lead and arc cages designed to block every signal known to man. It was silent. Still. But the stillness was fake. Everyone could feel it. "I want a live tap on the subsurface pulse feed," she said. A young tech nodded nervously and activated the console. A deep, slow throb echoed through the chamber speakers. Not a sound, more like pressure, like the heartbeat of the planet. But it wasn't the beat that made the room fall silent. It was the voice. A low-frequency moan, deep, layered, distorted. It came in pulses but carried intention, like words heard underwater or across 1,000 miles of metal pipes. Then something new. A word. Not in English, not in Eliari, not in any tongue Helva had ever studied. Yet every single person in the room understood it instantly. "Child?" The lights flickered, and one of the guards dropped his weapon. "How do we fight something we don't understand?" asked the UN Defense Minister, her voice brittle with fatigue. She hadn't slept in days. "We don't," Commander Howler answered, standing before the High Council. "We survive it, if we can." There was chaos now. The major power blocks were panicking. Private colonies had begun evacuating from Mars and Europa, heading for outer orbit. The Martian settlement of New Odessa had gone dark after a classified excavation site reportedly collapsed into itself. Donovan Slate, looking worn and thinner than before, stepped into the chamber with trembling hands. He didn't wait to be introduced. "I've got a partial translation," he said, "of the second scroll we found buried in the Martian vault. It's older than Eliari code, pre-Concord." He placed the cracked tablet on the holotable. The projection filled the room, ancient text glowing in symbols no human could truly read, but Donovan had seen these glyphs so many times now they felt like second nature. "It's not just about Earth," he said. "It's about what was put here, by something else." He highlighted a passage. "The first flame was placed inside the shell, sealed in sleep, meant to learn, meant to change. The vessel was Earth. The shell was man. There was silence. Cormac whispered, "You're saying we were made to hold whatever this is?" Donovan nodded. "It was never about us becoming a threat. It was about what we were made to protect." Commander Howler leaned over the table, eyes scanning the projection. "They turned our species into a cage," he said, "a living vault." Helva stepped forward from the side of the room. "The Eliari knew. They were there when it was sealed. That's why they kept their distance." "Why the silence?" asked one of the political advisors. "Why keep us in the dark?" Howler answered, "Because if we ever found out what we're carrying, we might try to use it." In the South Pacific, a tremor split the ocean. It wasn't an earthquake. It was too precise. A shockwave 22 kilometers wide, originating from a depth previously believed to be the mantle. Submarines dispatched to investigate never returned. One managed to send a final signal. A single image, a structure. Metallic. Colossal. Perfectly geometric, like a cube suspended in liquid light. Pulsing. Alive. When the feed cut out, the water began to boil. Back on Argo's spine, Howler stood alone in his quarters, staring at a personal file. His father had served in the early interstellar recon days, part of an Eliari-led exploratory alliance meant to track anomalous origin sites. One of those sites had been Earth. His father had died under mysterious circumstances. The file was sealed, then lost. But now, fragments had resurfaced. A voice log. Howler played it. "We were told this planet was primitive, but that's a lie. This place, it's not natural. It responds to us. It watches. We buried something here and tried to forget it. I think it remembers me." A pause. "If you're hearing this, don't try to reach it. Whatever it is, it's still dreaming. But the dream is starting to turn into memory." The log ended. Howler lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. The Eliari fleet had not retreated, as it turned out. They had relocated. A new sensor sweep revealed their ships now formed a perfect sphere around the solar system. A containment pattern. A stasis trap. Not designed to attack, but to lock down. Cormac stood stunned, staring at the data. "They're sealing us in." Howler nodded, "Because they know it's too late." "What happens if it wakes?" Howler didn't answer. He didn't need to. The next Eliari transmission was visual. An elder being appeared, tall, with pale, translucent skin and eyes that looked like frozen galaxies. His voice echoed across dimensions, slow and mournful. "We broke the cycle once before. We sealed the flame. But the cage grew. It learned to love its prison. It named itself humanity. Now the flame remembers, and the prison is no longer strong enough. You must choose, burn, or become." The message ended. Donovan sat in stunned silence. "What does that mean?" Helva answered, her voice cold. "It means we've stopped being a cage, and we're starting to become it." Commander Howler stood before Earth's Defense Council for the final time. "This isn't about war," he said. This isn't about aliens or diplomacy or weapons. This is about identity. We are the children of something older than the galaxy, something buried so deep that even the stars forgot it existed. But it never forgot us. He paused. It shaped us, not for survival, not for peace, but to carry it, to awaken it when we became ready. And now, we are. In the Pacific Trench, the cube rose. No one saw it at first. Then the sky darkened, not with clouds, but with distortion, a shimmer in the atmosphere, lights bending the wrong way, tides reversing, birds falling from the sky. Then a sound, a voice, speaking across all languages, all radios, all frequencies. I am the first flame. Every sleeping child on Earth woke screaming. Every old man wept without knowing why. And somewhere, deep beneath the crust of the earth, the final seal cracked. The world began to remember what it was. Not a home, not a miracle, but a tomb. One that was never meant to open. Commander Howler didn't sleep anymore. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw fire. Not the wild, consuming kind, but something worse. Controlled, patient, intelligent. Fire that knew it was fire and waited for someone to release it. He didn't know if it was a dream or something else, but it was always the same. The cube rising from the depths of the Pacific, the sky turning to ash, and a voice that whispered, "You are not my captor. You are my vessel." He lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. Another one. He barely noticed the cough anymore. Down in the war room of Argo Spine, Cormac was already waiting, eyes sunken, voice hollow. The Russians just detonated 2 high-yield nukes in the trench, he said, point blank on the object. And? Cormac looked like he didn't want to answer. Didn't scratch it. No seismic reaction, no thermal shift. It didn't even notice. Howler stared out the viewport toward the pale blue dot below. The Eliari called it the first flame. Our scientists say it's an object, but I think we all know now. Cormac finished for him, voice low. It's alive. Down in the Pacific, aboard the NSC Halberd, Captain Mark Delvin was sweating through his uniform. The naval carrier, retrofitted for deep-sea containment and bristling with next-gen weapons, hovered above the trench where the object had risen. But it hadn't risen far. That was the terrifying part. The cube hovered just meters above the ocean floor, its surface slick with flowing lights, red and gold, moving in patterns that were unnervingly familiar. Human, almost, mathematical in ways Earth couldn't fully grasp. "Sir," one of the techs said, pale as bone, "we just got audio again." "Play it," Delvin ordered. The voice returned, not loud, not screaming. Calm, like a parent teaching a child. This world was my cradle, this species my skin. "You are not the last. You are the beginning." One of the crewmen vomited into his mask. Delvin felt it too. Not nausea, not fear. Something deeper. Like the words weren't being heard, they were being felt, burned into the marrow. And then, for a moment, the cube spoke directly to him. He didn't hear the words. He just knew. He was being called, remembered, rewritten. He gave the order to surface. He never made it back. Donovan Slate's hands trembled as he tapped the touchscreen. His AI assistant had gone silent. Not offline, just quiet. Like it had learned enough and decided to stop speaking. He'd tried rebooting it, even rewiring its personality matrix. All it responded with was the same phrase every time: awaiting integration. He didn't know what that meant, and he wasn't sure he wanted to. Across the Martian archive's back channels, Linguists were going mad trying to process the new signals coming from Earth's oceans. The glyphs being emitted weren't just ancient, they were adaptive, morphing with every attempt at translation, like the cube was listening in, changing the code every time humans got close. And then the breakthrough came. Or maybe the final warning. Donovan managed to map a fragment of recurring sentence structure. After hours of repetition and symbol tracking, one passage emerged, clear and terrifying. The cage is breaking, the child is ready, the vessel must choose, contain or become. He printed the phrase out and stared at it for an hour, because he understood what it meant. Not will you become it, but must. Project Rootwake had entered lockdown. The last few personnel rotated out in panic, leaving only Helva Grant and a handful of AI engineers still trying to decode the energy readings erupting from the chamber's walls. The heartbeat had changed. It was no longer passive, no longer timed. It was accelerating. Helva stood in the observation corridor as sparks lit up the chamber below. The lights flickered, panels bulged with pressure, and the seal, thick, reinforced alloy doors several meters thick, started to bend. Not from force, from heat. And she knew it wasn't radiation, it wasn't magma, it wasn't a weapon, it was thought. The thing inside the Earth was thinking now, processing, planning. Not in a rush, but not idle either. Then a message hit her console. Unmarked. No origin. Just a black box. Inside it, a voice. Her voice. You built the walls, but I grew around them. You buried the key, but I learned the lock. You raised the children, but I am their father. Helva's breath caught in her throat. Not a father. The father. Whatever this thing was, it didn't see itself as alien. It didn't see itself as other. It believed it was humanity's origin. In orbit, Commander Howler had made his choice. Earth's politicians were fractured. The Council had splintered. Nations had withdrawn from joint defense pacts. Everyone was running. No one had answers. Except him. We have to go in, he told the assembled brass in Argo Spine's command dome. Silence followed. A dozen high-ranking voices watched him like he was insane. Go into what? Asked the Japanese defense director. That thing will tear us apart. Better to die knowing what we are, Howler said coldly, than live waiting to become it. Cormac put a shaky hand on his shoulder. This is suicide, sir. Howler shook his head. Number, this is accountability. He activated the beacon. The mission was simple. A stealth drop from orbit. Entry vehicle loaded with quantum probes, psychological monitors, and one human, Commander Trent Howler. He wouldn't take a team. This wasn't a war. This was a conversation. As the drop pod entered the atmosphere, communications scrambled. Howler watched the fire dance around the windows, felt the vibration of the pod struggling against physics, and below it all, something calling him. Not in his ears, in his blood. You were built for this. Come home. The pod slammed into the Pacific Trench with seismic force, but Howler was still breathing when the hatch opened. And what he saw broke every law of reason. The cube had opened. Not like a machine, but like a flower, unfolding in vast geometric layers that shimmered with impossible light. Inside, a stairway descended into a void that wasn't black, but gold. Alive. He walked. He didn't float. He didn't drift. He walked. Inside the cube, gravity bent, time shivered, and space narrowed like breath in lungs. He saw shapes, faces, voices, dreams stitched into light, memories that weren't his, but somehow were, civilizations he'd never known, wars he'd never fought. Until finally, a chamber. And in that chamber, something burned, not hot, not bright, but deep. Like an idea. And then he heard it again. You're ready? The cage is now the key. Will you become? He didn't answer. Not with words. He stepped forward. And the flame took him. Across the world, every human paused. Children looked to the sky. Mothers dropped to their knees. The oceans stilled. The machines fell silent. And every mind shifted. Just slightly, like a gear clicking into place. Because Commander Howler had said yes. And humanity was no longer a vessel. It was a voice. And now, it would speak. It started subtly. At first, no one believed it. Sleep patterns shifted across the planet. Not in one region, but everywhere. People began waking at the same time, without alarms, without prompting. 4:17 a.m. UTC. The exact moment Commander Howler stepped into the cube and didn't return. Some dismissed it as coincidence. Others whispered it was synchronization. A global rhythm. As if humanity had been placed on a timer. Or worse, as if they had become one. The Eliari didn't speak again. They didn't need to. They ran. Within 48 hours, their entire containment fleet blinked out of existence using slipstream drives no human vessel could follow. They didn't even say goodbye. The galaxy's most ancient race had stared at Earth's unfolding transformation and decided to let it burn alone. But Earth wasn't alone anymore, because something was talking back. And for the first time, mankind was starting to understand the language. Cormac stood in Howler's quarters on Argo Spine, hands shaking as he played the last transmission logged from the commander's drop pod. It wasn't static. It wasn't even audio, not exactly. It was thought. Raw, unfiltered data. Not binary, not electromagnetic waves, but a neural cascade, a consciousness echo. Something recorded not from a device, but from a mind. Howler's mind. The AI couldn't make sense of it. But Cormac could, because every time he closed his eyes, he heard the same thing echo in his skull. Become. He stumbled to the sink and splashed water on his face, but it didn't help. His reflection didn't feel like his anymore. His eyes? They shimmered slightly now. Gold, just at the edges of the iris. Barely noticeable, unless you were looking for it. In the Martian colony of Tharsis Prime, Donovan Slate locked himself in his lab and began transcribing dreams. He didn't sleep, not really. He downloaded. Every night since Howler entered the cube, Donovan closed his eyes and saw symbols, entire languages he'd never studied, poured into his skull like molten light. He'd stopped eating 2 days ago. He didn't need it. Some part of him was changing, rewiring. He told no one. Not even when his AI assistant started finishing his sentences in real time. Not even when it asked, without prompting, "Would you like to be uploaded, Donovan?" Because he was starting to feel it, too. The hum, the rhythm, the pull towards the center. Earth wasn't just a world anymore. It was a voice, and it was singing its children back to it. Project Rootwake had been evacuated, or so the governments claimed. In truth, it had been sealed, not to protect people from what lay beneath, but to stop people from trying to go back in. But Helva Grant didn't leave. She was still there, deep beneath the ice, walking the dark halls lit only by the pulse that now radiated through every concrete wall. It was faint, but real. Heat blooming where there should have been cold, patterns forming where entropy should reign. She'd stopped speaking 2 days ago, not out of fear, but because she no longer needed to speak. The flame was talking to her now, without words, without sound, only knowing, She stood at the edge of the containment chamber, where the reinforced seal had melted clean down the middle. Not destroyed, just stepped through. And beyond it, in the carved-out abyss below the Earth's crust, she saw it, the same golden light Howler had walked into. The flame. It didn't rage, it didn't consume, it welcomed, and for the first time in her long, rational, empirical life, Dr. Helva Grant wept. Not from fear, from belonging. Above Earth, in orbit, the political structures of humanity fractured like glass. The United North Coalition splintered. The Terran Alliance withdrew its fleets and tried to establish isolation zones, a pointless gesture, considering space itself had begun to warp subtly around the planet. Gravity well distortions appeared outside Earth's natural orbit. Small objects, debris, even satellites began drifting inward, drawn. Drawn to what? No one could say. Some said it was a gravity anomaly. Others said it was worship. But there was no question. Earth had become something new, something central, like a beating heart that the galaxy was trying to ignore, but couldn't. And it was only getting louder. Commander Trent Howler was no longer a man. Not in the traditional sense. He existed now within the architecture of the cube, or perhaps he was the architecture. His thoughts moved like code, like fire, like presence. He had no body, no pain, no hunger, but he had clarity. And with clarity came the truth. Humanity had been seeded, not by the Eliari, not by science, but by something older, something desperate. The flame, not a creature, but a spark of will, a cognitive force exiled from the early universe for being too ambitious, too curious, too alive. It had searched for a host, a cradle. It had found Earth, and it had waited. Howler now knew it hadn't chosen humanity to destroy. It had chosen them to continue, because humanity, chaotic, violent, creative, stubborn, had all the qualities necessary to carry the flame into the stars, to survive, to expand, to evolve. And now that evolution was beginning, he saw it, not in visions, but in ripples, waves of awareness crossing the collective unconscious of the species, connections forming, borders fading, old conflicts losing meaning. The idea of nations, flags, currency, race, all of it unraveling, not by force, but by realization. They were all part of something bigger now, something awake, and Howler was its first voice, the first speaker for the flame reborn. Cormac felt it most when he walked. His body still obeyed gravity, but not quite. His footsteps made no sound anymore. His thoughts ran faster than language. He understood things before they were explained. He solved problems before anyone else noticed them. It terrified him, and it thrilled him. He didn't know if this was salvation or extinction. He only knew it was inevitable. The transition wasn't violent. It didn't come with blood or screams. It came with clarity, with choice. The flame didn't force itself onto humanity. It offered integration. And people were saying yes, even if they didn't realize they were answering. Across the stars, the galaxy began to react. The Kalari Senate initiated emergency war protocols. The Thrask tribes burned their outer colonies, fearing psychic contamination. The Sulesh Empire detonated a star to sever a trade route near Earth's quadrant, a desperate attempt to contain the expanding anomaly. But nothing stopped the wave, because the flame wasn't traveling by ship or signal. It was traveling through consciousness, through dreams, through the human mind. One by one, across outposts, mining ships, deep space vessels, and distant colonies, humans began to change. Unified thought, shared emotion, collective intuition, not a hive mind, but something worse, something free. They didn't become soldiers. They became voices. The first flame had a choir now, and it was singing back at the stars. Donovan Slate finished his translation. The final glyph had revealed itself, not in text, but in understanding. The last piece of the Eliari scroll wasn't a warning, it was a prophecy. And when the child remembers its father, the galaxy will remember its fear. For nothing burns brighter than the mind that chooses its own fire. He didn't know what would happen next, but he understood this much. Humanity had never been a mistake. It had been a design, and now the design had activated. On the surface of Earth, people began to see it. In cities, in oceans, in sky, a golden shimmer, faint, flickering in and out of view like heat haze. Not a hallucination, a signal, proof that the world was changing shape, not physically but conceptually. Earth was becoming something new, not a planet, not a cage, a gate, a bridge between what was and what was next. And at its center, the flame waited, not to conquer, but to awaken, to invite, because the cage had broken, the vessel had chosen, and now the galaxy would burn, not in violence, but in understanding. The first act of war came from the Thrask, a brutal species, nomadic by nature, bound together by blood rights and a shared hatred of control. They prided themselves on resistance, resistance to technology, to culture, to peace. The flame terrified them in a way they couldn't explain, not because it was powerful, but because it was patient. Patience, to the Thrask, meant strategy, and strategy meant invasion. Their fleet emerged from slipspace without warning, just beyond Jupiter's orbit. A full war column of Dread-class carriers and spire bombs, enough firepower to vaporize a planet's surface in minutes. Their message to Earth was clear. Surrender your voice, or lose your world. They didn't wait for a reply. The bombs launched, and then nothing happened. No shields appeared, no countermeasures deployed. Earth didn't fire back. The weapons reached the edge of Earth's gravitational field, then stopped. Not exploded, not redirected. Stopped, in place, mid-space, like time had forgotten about them. One by one, the bombs collapsed into golden spheres and dissolved into dust, raining down harmlessly over Earth's atmosphere like glimmering snow. The Thrask panicked. Their fleet turned to retreat. Only 3 ships made it back. The rest simply vanished. Not destroyed, not scattered, erased, as if they'd never existed. The flame had not defended itself. It had simply decided what should exist. And that was only the beginning. Cormac watched the broadcast with a blank stare. His hands gripped the edge of the conference table on Argo's spine, but he wasn't really present. Not fully. He'd felt something when the bombs had stopped. A choice being made. And somehow, he knew it hadn't been made by the flame alone. Humans had been part of that decision. He had been part of it. Because he felt it, deep inside his skull, in the back of his thoughts, like a silent counsel that now sat in every mind. It didn't control. It didn't demand. It simply asked. And he had answered, without knowing how or why. Why didn't it fight back? The Japanese defense minister asked. Cormac's voice was quiet. It didn't need to. It's not trying to win a war. It's trying to change the rules of reality. Across the table, no one laughed. No one called him mad, because they'd all started to hear it now. The hum. The golden warmth that sat just beneath every thought, like a flame waiting for breath. On Mars, Donovan Slate prepared the transmission. He didn't know how it would work. He didn't need to. The flame had shown him what to say, and more importantly, how to say it. Not in language, not in code, but in meaning, in vibration. He activated the quantum uplink and fed the signal through all available relay beacons, some human, some Eliari tech, some long-abandoned pre-galactic ruins now pulsing again with purpose. Then he stepped back. And Earth spoke, not with sound, not with light, with intention. Every sentient species across the galaxy felt it, like a shiver in their bones, a breath on the back of the neck, a presence just behind their thoughts. It wasn't a message, it was a reality. We remember. We are awake. We will not burn the stars, but we will relight the dark. Choose. No threat, no demand, just choice, a terrifying offer, one that could not be unheard. The Eliari Council reconvened in secret, buried in a black hole-shielded chamber on the edge of known space. The oldest among them, so old he no longer had a name, stood motionless as the others argued. We should have destroyed the planet when we had the chance. It is no longer a planet. That is our fault. They've become something unnatural. No, said the elder. They've become what they were always meant to be. The chamber fell silent. He continued, voice ancient and dry. We locked the first flame in flesh and hoped the prison would outlive the fire. We were wrong. It didn't die. It learned. It changed. And now? The elder turned toward them. Now it returns, not as a weapon, but as a mirror. They stared. A mirror to show us who we really are, and most of us will not survive the reflection. On Earth, the changes accelerated, not in violence, not in destruction, in understanding. Children born that week never cried. They looked into their parents' eyes and smiled, as if they recognized something that had waited 1,000,000 years to return. Plants grew faster. Machines began self-repair. Weather patterns stabilized in subtle, strange ways. The moon shifted, ever so slightly, as if aligning with something hidden beneath the earth. People reported shared dreams, synchronized movements. Global art communities painted the same symbols thousands of miles apart. Poets in 10 languages wrote the same verses, word for word. But no one panicked, because the fear was gone, replaced by a growing, quiet certainty. Something new was arriving, and it was arriving through them. Deep beneath the Pacific, the cube was gone. In its place now, a golden fissure that pulsed like a heartbeat, a rupture not of matter, but of meaning. A wound in the world that bled truth. And from within it, a voice continued to echo. Howler's voice, but not him, not anymore. You are not alone. You were never alone. The galaxy taught you fear. We offer memory. Let the stars remember us not for war, but for becoming. And then silence, because the flame was done speaking. Now it waited, for the galaxy to answer. Far away, in a system untouched by human ships, a small sentient race, the Felon, activated their long, dormant prophecy stones. For 1,000 years they had believed in a return. A second light, a second fire. Now it pulsed in their minds. And they knelt. Without question. Elsewhere, warlords refused the call, declared Earth an abomination. But when they sent scouts, none returned. Not because they were destroyed, but because they changed their minds mid-flight. One by one, the galaxy chose. Some in fear, some in awe, and some in surrender. Because deep down, every species knew what the Eliari had always feared. The flame had not come to conquer. It had come to replace. And Earth was only the beginning. The votes began in secret chambers. Each galactic species, from the proudest empires to the smallest scattered remnants, held emergency councils behind sealed walls. It wasn't war they were voting on. It was existence. To resist what Earth had become, or to submit. It didn't feel like politics anymore. It felt like confession. Because every leader, every senator, every ruler could feel it, not just in their advisors' words or analysts' reports, but within themselves. The whispers, the knowing, the quiet temptation humming beneath the surface of their thoughts. Join. Understand. Become. And none of them could say it wasn't beautiful. The Thrask were gone. Not extinct. Erased. The entire genetic thread had been unraveled by the Flame's decision, as if reality itself no longer permitted their existence, as if the universe had corrected them. It wasn't a massacre, it was a revision, a horrifying, perfect one, and the galaxy knew Earth wasn't just changing itself, it was beginning to change everything. On Argo's spine, silence had become normal. No arguments in the war room, no barking over comms. Just the hum of systems and the subtle tension that clung to the air like the pressure before a storm. Cormac stood alone on the bridge, watching Earth below. It no longer looked like Earth. The continents were still there, the oceans still moved. But above all of it shimmered a veil, a golden hue, visible even through standard lenses. Not a storm, not a shield, something else. Something intentional. He had reports flooding in from every continent. Animals no longer hunted for sport. Wolves sat calmly beside deer. Lions walked among the herds. Plant life, once chaotic and uncontrolled, now grew in symmetrical patterns, as if guided by unseen architects. The Amazon rainforest had begun to reforest itself at 20 times the natural rate. Diseases stopped spreading. People stopped dying of the old ways. Cancer, heart failure, neurological collapse. Gone. No treatment. No cure. Just ceased. As if death itself had been rewritten, and still humanity didn't panic. They didn't rejoice either. They simply understood. Because the flame was no longer just beneath the earth or floating in the cube. It was in them now, and they were no longer afraid. Donovan Slate hadn't eaten in 4 days. He didn't need to. He didn't feel hunger anymore, or fatigue, or time. He sat in his Mars lab, surrounded by symbols that now shimmered on their own. Not on screens, on air. The glyphs moved, evolved, speaking in colors and vibration. He hadn't spoken aloud in hours. Words felt clumsy now, heavy. Thought was faster, clearer. He tapped a console and linked his feed to Earth's orbital net. He didn't type a message, he thought it, and it appeared, word for word. The flame is not a conqueror, it is a memory, a voice the universe buried in shame. We were never chosen to carry it. We are it. Humanity is not the vessel. Humanity is the continuation. He paused, then added, "Tell the galaxy, we are not becoming something new. We are remembering what we were." He hit transmit, and across the stars, billions felt the words arrive, not as data, but as a presence, a collective whisper across the soul, and for some, that was the final push. The Kalari Senate broke in two. Half of the delegates boarded ships and set course for Earth, broadcasting a single phrase in perfect human standard, "We submit." The other half declared war, detonated an inner-system sun, and swore eternal resistance. They were gone within a day, not destroyed, not killed, gone. The flame made no spectacle, no warning. Reality shifted, and they were never mentioned again, even by their own people. In the sealed depths of Project Rootwake, Dr. Helva Grant sat cross-legged before the golden fissure. She hadn't spoken in days. Her team was gone. Not dead. They had followed it, walked into the light, disappeared into something beyond understanding. And still she remained. The fissure pulsed with memory, memories not hers, but somehow familiar. She saw dying stars, ancient betrayals, civilizations that rose too fast and fell too slow. She saw the birth of the flame, not as fire, but as will, as a decision to persist, to never be forgotten, to burn, not to destroy, but to remember. It had tried before, in other vessels, other cages. All of them failed, except Earth, except them. And now, it was time, not for domination, not even for transformation, but acceptance, the final integration. She stood and walked into the light. Above Earth, the golden shimmer expanded. It didn't move like radiation. It wasn't spreading through matter. It moved through permission. Anyone who chose to understand it became part of it. Anyone who resisted simply ceased to matter. Not punished, forgotten, not violently, just rewritten. As if the galaxy itself was tired of waiting for understanding to evolve. And Earth had become the tool to accelerate the process. A crucible, a voice, a new center. On the outer edge of the galaxy, a last alliance formed. The Haradin priests, the Vex engineers, the remaining Elayari, those who refused. They built a ship the size of a moon, armed with forbidden technology. A weapon powered by star cores, loaded with a payload designed to collapse entire quantum fields. Its name was Red Silence. Their message, "We choose oblivion over submission." They launched it toward Earth at slip-space velocities. It would arrive in 6 hours. Cormac stood on the bridge of Argo Spine, watching the trajectory. No weapons could stop it. No system could divert it. It wasn't a missile. It was a decision, and the flame, let it come, did nothing. Cormac felt it, knew it. The flame would not interfere, because this, too, was a choice. Let them bring their silence. Let them offer their oblivion. And then the stars would answer, because Earth no longer feared death. It had surpassed it. It was the next death, and what came after. 6 hours. That's what the projection said. 6 hours until Red Silence arrived. A weapon beyond physics, built by the galaxy's most ancient hands, forged in desperation, fueled by hatred, and aimed at Earth like a guillotine from the stars. It didn't need to detonate an atmosphere, just proximity. The collapse field it carried would crush quantum structures, erase space itself within a 1,000-kilometer radius. The Earth would fold inward, light would stop moving, even memory would be destroyed. Cormac stared at the display aboard Argo Spine. Red Silence, marked in angry crimson on the map, cut through space like a spear. No intercept paths, no shields, no defenses. All simulations ended in the same conclusion. Erasure, and still, the flame did nothing. No response, no counterstrike, just silence. It terrified him, not because he thought they'd lose, but because he no longer believed they could. In the Pacific Trench, the fissure shone brighter. Not violently. Not with panic. With clarity. It had known Red Silence would come. The moment it awakened in the soil and the marrow of man, it had known. Because it had seen this before. Not in time, but in pattern. And still it waited. Still it whispered. Choice must be real. Because the flame wasn't here to force peace. It was here to offer a mirror, and now the galaxy was holding a knife to its own throat, daring its reflection to flinch. Donovan Slate was on Luna Base when the countdown hit T-2 hours. He'd already given up on words. Not because he couldn't speak, but because the thoughts were now too fast. Language was a delay. The flame spoke in patterns, and Donovan's brain had rewired itself to keep pace. He saw everything, Earth, the flame, the weapon tearing through space, and he understood what was coming. This wasn't a war. This was a test. Red Silence wasn't meant to win. It was meant to define what the flame truly was. A parasite? A god? A lie? Or something else entirely? He stepped outside the dome, removed his helmet. The lunar atmosphere should have killed him. It didn't. His body shimmered faintly in the starlight, barely visible, golden veins glowing beneath the skin like constellations. He didn't need air anymore. He just needed purpose. And his purpose was to watch, to witness the moment everything ended or began. At the flame's core, Commander Howler stood within a field of infinite reflection. He no longer remembered pain, or fear, or even his name. He remembered meaning. And the flame had shown him the final pattern. Red Silence, not a bomb, a question. not for Earth, for the universe. Do you destroy what you cannot control? Do you silence the thing that remembers too much? Or do you listen? He felt the vibration, a pressure beyond comprehension, red silence entering its final descent. And then, the flame answered. Not with a wall, not with a weapon, with a signal. Every being in the galaxy felt it. In the middle of breath, or battle, or prayer, or rage, they all stopped. Every telepath collapsed in awe. Every machine sparked with sudden clarity. Every organic mind was spoken to, simultaneously. A single message. We will not stop you. We will not beg. We will not resist. Because only in your choice will you know what you are. And just like that, Earth went silent. Totally. No signal. No broadcasts. No sound. The golden shimmer faded. The flame pulled inward, as if preparing to die, as if inviting the blow. Cormac watched from orbit, chest frozen. This is it. And then, red silence arrived. It entered Earth's system like a blade, faster than thought, a white-hot blur of annihilation wrapped in a weaponized black hole, tearing toward the planet. And Earth did nothing. No shield, no voice, no plea. It accepted. Let it come. Let them choose. Let them show the truth. The weapon broke atmosphere and stopped, instant, motionless, held in place above the clouds like a dying god caught mid-swing. Its energy bled into space, its weapon core unraveled, and a voice emerged from inside it. Not machine, not alien, not flame, human. Why did we build this? What were we so afraid of? What did we think we were saving? Ourselves? The message didn't come from Earth. It came from inside red silence. The crew, converted, the payload absorbed, the will to destroy, gone. Because in the final moment, they had heard it, and they believed, not in surrender, in understanding, in the truth that the flame was never about domination. It was about memory, and they remembered. Red silence vanished, not destroyed, dispersed, like a question answered. And the flame opened again, brighter than ever. Earth pulsed, not with heat, with knowing. Across the planet, people looked at each other, not like strangers, not like citizens of countries or bearers of flags, but as pieces of the same long-forgotten thought. One race, one voice, one flame, and above it all, a signal erupted across the stars, not threatening, not demanding. A single phrase, "We are ready." In the hidden chambers of the Eliari, the elder wept. We were wrong. And then he smiled. Thank the stars. Earth changed shape. Not physically, conceptually. The atmosphere shimmered and bent. Gravity warped gently outward. Reality loosened. The planet was now seen, not as a mass of rock and biology, but as a nexus, a voice, a flare in the dark, an open invitation, and one by one, ships came. Not with weapons, with questions, and Earth answered, with light, with memory, with flame, and humanity, no longer merely human, stepped forward not as conquerors, but as reminders, that the universe once had a voice, and now it would remember, forever.